Howdy folks, we're looking at Edge Magazine issue 18 with the Atari logo, released in March 1995. And the next article is about the future of the PC, because believe it or not, in England, which is where Edge is from, the Amiga and the Atari ST were as popular, if not more popular, than the IBM PC up until the mid-90s. And around this time, people were starting to find out that, Amiga and Atari can't compete anymore with the PC, nor can the Japanese equivalents. So, go PC gaming. And right now, yes, it's the Intel chip has the largest share. It's they're in all computers, but at the time it was mostly the Intel chip that was of interest when it came to the PC, because the competitor would be the Power PC, which used a RISC chip made by IBM, Motorola, and Apple. So, but the PC seemed to be winning. Soon it would have Windows 95, and one of the biggest advantages of the new future of the PC would be that the RAM bus, which used to be, I think, only like 480K, could now finally be approved upon. Apparently, in the past, PC games had to use workarounds to be able to load more memory, but now they finally have the freedom. So this article talks about all these things. It also has little snippets of classic games like the original Ultima in 1982 and Ultima Underworld, released in 1992. We have here Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, of course. Here's a little graph showing how PC computers kept getting faster and faster, and they sure did. It was like I had a 386 as a kid, and the 486, which a friend had, was so much faster. I mean, it was only a difference of 8 megahertz, but yeah, it sure was faster. And then the Pentiums came, and that blew everything else away. And another game they're featuring is Magic Carpet. Alright, let's continue with the next article, featuring the famous logo, probably the best looking logo in video game history still, Atari. And this article shows its past, how it started with Pong and a lot of arcade games, then got into home computers like the Atari VCS, also known as the 2600. This is a later model, I believe. This would be the 800 series, which is a personal computer for home. Here's the 520 ST. I think this is the later ST. They have a laptop. This is their latest one. It has a nice visual interface. The links. This is like some kind of drawing tablet, and of course a Jaguar. It's interesting how people thought of Atari at the time. They had, let's look at these three quotes. So Bullfrog, Peter Molyneux, said, "They failed because they thought their competition was Commodore when it was actually Nintendo and Sega." Probably discussing the Jaguar here, but here it's positive. If Nintendo and Sega are E17 and Take That, respectively, now these were boy bands of the 90s, then we are the Rolling Stones. We might be the oldest kids on the block, but we're still rocking. That's what Atari has to say, at least. And Sensible Software says, "There are too many machines in the marketplace, full stop." So, yeah. Atari didn't have a chance anyway. So here's the Tramiel family. Jack Tramiel, he took over Atari in the mid-80s, after establishing the Commodore brand, and his son Sam Tramiel, he became the president of Atari, setting up the Jaguar, maybe also the Lynx. So a lot more quotes here. Let's talk about the crash and the future of Atari. Well, one interesting thing is, which I didn't know, was that Atari had a lot of patents, and they started going after other companies, mostly Sega. And apparently, after going after Sega, helped them because they could then release Sega games on the Jaguar, like Daytona and Virtual Fighting. They never did that, but that was part of the plan. There's some talk about the Jaguar CD and the VR headset too. And here's an interview with Sam Tramiel. It was rather stoic. His answers are very clean and professional, and optimistic, of course. Yeah, one question that's an example is it true that Atari is considering buying the shattered Commodore company? We aren't happy about the demise of Commodore, have no plans to acquire the leftovers. Very clean answers here. So, that's Sam Tramiel. Again, that VR headset, I'd love to find out more about that. And the reviews. So first, Toshinden, the first fighting game for the PlayStation. A bit sluggish and simple in gameplay, and that's what Edge also thinks. So they say that Virtual Fighter is better. Nevertheless, they still give the game an 8 out of 10, which I think it's too high. Most people weren't that positive about the game. And it's merely because of the graphics, really, that it scored a high grade, which makes it a bit hypocritical because the next game they review is Clockwork Night. And this game they gave a 6, which also had pedestrian gameplay. Nothing better than we've seen in years. And this game looked fantastic. It had Donkey Kong Country-like sprites with all that neat shading, and a background that moved in very interesting ways, kind of like Nights into Dreams. So, yeah, a lackluster game, ultimately, but pretty to look at. And Edge gives it a 6. Well, if they can give Toshinden an 8, I'm a bit confused. On to Motortown Grand Prix. PlayStation's other racing game at the release, and probably steered towards kid. A lot of fun animation, cars bouncing around. Not that much of an interesting racing game. And again, Edge gives only a 6 because it's not a lot of fun to play. It's nice to look at only. Here's Alone in the Dark 3. This time, the game plays in the Wild West during around 1925. And Edge mentions that it doesn't look better than previous versions and criticizes that. But the story is interesting. And this is still probably the best Alone in the Dark game ever made. And it gets a 7. Samurai Showdown 2. Not a big difference with Samurai Showdown 1, which was almost perfect to begin with. It has quite a lot of new fighters, so that's good. And this is the CD version, so that was cheaper to buy. Edge gives it an 8. And if you ask me, this is the apex of the series, just like Alone in the Dark 3 was. I don't know much about Samurai Showdown 3. Maybe there's even a 4. But they never interested me. There's also a Samurai Showdown 64, which had 3D graphics. Nobody played that game. So, Iron Soldier for the Jaguar. This game got an 8, and it's for the Jaguar. Yeah, like I said, it's for the Jaguar. Uses a lot of polygons, and Edge mentions it's a bit slow, which a MechWarrior game should be like, but they're quite positive about it, saying it has solid gameplay. I should check out to see what other people said about Iron Soldier, because I've never heard of it before. And while we wait for the camera to focus, we have Marble Madness for the PC. This is a retro view. Released in 1986, you had a level and a marble which you had to steer downwards. So very original concept, fun to play. And Edge is very positive about it. A more modern version would be Super Monkey Ball. Okay, we have the advertisements for all the companies you could work for back then. You might recognize some of them. And here's an interview with Gunpei Yokoi, the maker of the Game Boy and Virtual Boy. And he has two very odd things to say. First of all, this quote here, he says, "Many people have already said that they can't understand the difference between the next generation machines and the 16-bit machines." Well, I don't think that was the case. Really, the PlayStation sure did look different than the Super Nintendo. I'm not saying it was better, but it definitely showed some progress. And what's really funny is what he says here about why not make the Virtual Boy as like most of the other VR systems, which you mount on your head. You see, in the Virtual Boy, you place on a table in front of you, and then you stick your head against the goggles. And one of the reasons why was, well, first of all, they didn't use any motion tracking facility. Fair enough. That would have been hard to produce for a cheap price. But also this, check this out. We are worried about the possible dangers of HMD technology. But, sorry, that's not the interesting part. But we also consider the fact that if a woman wearing makeup was to use the head-mounted design, the next person might be hesitant in wearing it. Can you believe that? So, yeah, as if, right? I don't think they really took that into account, did they? Well, maybe that's the way he thought. So the Virtual Boy, Nintendo's hugest flop. It had a 32-bit processor, but it needed those to make the 3D images. Everything else was very 8-bit in looks and gameplay. Games weren't that bad, and I don't believe you got a headache, but yeah, it just wasn't worth it. So some Q&A. People asking, "Where's that?" I heard that there's the level in Ridge Racer could be done mirrored, and Edge explains, yeah, you can ride against the wall and then apparently load the other level. I've never tried that myself. Must be fun. And but Q&A asking things like, why are PlayStation discs black? All that boring stuff. And that's the end of this issue. Next month we have Apple, as you can tell. At the time, getting interested in the video game marketplace with the Pippin. And also looking to have a bright future with the PowerPC technology. Well, that wouldn't be the case. It would take another 10 years before Apple got really big. But nevertheless, an interesting article. We'll see you then next time discussing Edge Magazine 19. But this was 18 with the red back. And look at that fantastic cover one more time. All they do is they slant the Atari logo to the left. And it's an instant classic. So yeah, see you next time.